This is Garfield High School here in East Los Angeles, and this is where the walkouts began here at Garfield.
When I was a student here, this patio quad area didn't exist. It was a Fickett Street that ran through here, and right across up here was the actual entrance to the high school.
I was only 15 years old. I had no clue to any of this.
When I went to Lincoln High School, and I was there from 1961 through 1967, I had a couple of teachers that were inspirational to me. There was an English teacher, drama teacher that I worked with. But as I saw more of the world and I met students in other parts of the city, I started to realize that really the education that I was getting at Lincoln High School was substandard.
I mean, this was a poor community, disadvantaged in so many ways, but rather politically and socially conservative. And so for this to suddenly just burst out in one day was extraordinary.
This is the original building in which we organized the Mexican-American movement, founded the Brown Berets, and also the location where we planned the school walkouts.
We, as a small group, starting in '65, spent all of our spare time together talking about what we could do to make a difference, why it was that none of us were being expected to go to college, why it was that we felt ashamed about being Mexican.
We had a jukebox here in this corner, and we had coffee, of course, and people came here to enjoy themselves and to relax amongst friends and amongst people that they never met before.
I had already become an activist when I was at Lincoln. I was one of the founders of Young Citizens for Community Action that included David Sanchez and included Vicky Castro.
During the time of the walkouts, I was a student at then LA State College, and I was working for the school district. I was a teacher assistant and a playground director.
We were called the Young Citizens for Community Action when we first came here to the coffee house. Then we wanted to bring up the stakes a little bit, so we changed the name to Young Chicanos for Community Action. Then I started wearing a brown beret, and people called me Brown Beret, and I felt that that was a good name for the organization because they were the Green Berets, and I felt that the Brown Berets would be a good psychological symbol to bring attention to the problems of the Mexican-American community.
I was fortunate. I got recruited to go to UCLA, and I was feeling very isolated and alone, and I was separated now from what now had become the Brown Berets. So I helped organize United Mexican-American Students. We decided that we would, as a group, support our fellow brothers and sisters who were still in high school, and they would have to make their own choice, but we would be there in support, and they chose to walk out.
Garfield High School was nearby, so we said that we could run to this location if we had to, and that's what happened. We did have to run.
There was an opening at Lincoln High School for a teaching assistant position, so I came up with the idea, let me make an appointment with the principal for the time that we had scheduled the students to walk out, sort of to, occupy his time as some of the others got on campus. We began the interview, and then, of course, he had to leave quickly. And as he left his office while I was being interviewed, I left the school and I drove over here to Roosevelt High School.
I was in biology class, I think the second floor of the old 200 building, one of the oldest buildings on campus. We heard just noise, just students shouting things like walkout and just shouting everything, Chicano power.
And as I entered the front doors of the school, I was met by a former teacher, and she told me at that time that, Vicki, if you come on campus, I'll have you arrested.
As we're looking out the window, I could hear a rumbling in the hallway. Some of the march organizers were pounding on the doors.
The windows going in and out of the schools, hollering walkout.
And I turned to my teacher, and I asked him if I could go outside to see what was happening.
They came out of the schools, and we sat down in front of the administration building. Everybody sat down. which resulted in the sheriff arriving.
Another group shows up, and I had only heard about them, never seen them, and it was a squad of the Brown Berets. They looked as militaristic as the sheriffs on the other side.
And the sheriffs set up their riot line. The sheriff said, "This is an unlawful assembly. We give you 10 minutes to leave or you will be arrested."
And I drove around to the other side of the school to see what was happening, and at that time I could see there were hundreds, if not thousands, of students that were trying to get out of the school. The administration had locked the gates to prevent them.
10 minutes ran out. The sheriff started coming across the grass and began to arrest the students and even hit many people over the head.
And at that time, some other organizers that I recognized called and asked me to bring over my car. They wanted to hook up a chain to the fence. Just as I pulled up my car, I think the students actually pushed hard enough, or the fence opened, and so I didn't really have to knock the gate out. There were police officers everywhere. They were using batons trying to get the kids back into school. I turned around and I got out of the area because I was afraid I would be stopped by the police.
I was still more of a observer, and I think that's the day I became a reporter. I saw sheriff's deputies chasing students, wrestling them down to the ground and handcuffing them, and my assumption that they would be arrested.
We were facing 66 years in prison. They made it a conspiracy charge.
And then we could hear outside of the jail thousands of people chanting and protesting our arrest. That made us feel that what we had done was worthwhile.
But luckily, because of our attorneys and because of the ACLU, we were able to get the legal support for them to drop the charges 2 years later.
What really offended me the most was the mayor of Los Angeles at the time, Sam Yorty, blaming the student walkouts on communists.
My father, who had always been very supportive of me as a college student, actually sat me down and said to me, "I never thought I would have raised a communist." And I was so shocked and so taken back.
The number one thing that the walkouts achieved is that it gave our own community a voice, that we didn't have to rely on what other people thought we should be doing or who we should be.
Students all through the country began to walk out: San Diego, New Mexico, Texas, Colorado. The students today are benefiting from the results of our actions. It resulted in people opening up the doors to universities and colleges. It also resulted in developing the Chicano studies.
The walkouts were maybe the seminal event in the awakening of Chicanos or the Mexican-American community.
The importance of the culture of our community, but also the importance of our need to survive. And the only way we're going to do this is we begin to tell our story. We are a part of a picture of America, but we've been excluded from the picture of America. And that's why it's important to tell the history of the walkouts.